Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today, we have Liz Michaelis back to the show. Liz is an abuse survivor, and she also has a prison ministry. Her nonprofit prison ministry is called Hope in Motion, and we did earlier a jiu-jitsu podcast with her that was released a few weeks ago. So we'd like to welcome you back to the show, Liz.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Good to see you all.
Yes, welcome back. So Liz, did you want to share a little bit of your background and what led you to get into the prison ministries?
Absolutely. So I have known since I was in high school that I wanted to be a social worker and I wanted to help other people. And so I knew I wanted to plug into the local juvenile prison to volunteer in a ministry-based capacity. So I had to wait until the age of 21. But as soon as I turned 21, I became a volunteer out there. And I've been volunteering out there for coming up on 18 years. And I've been addicted because once you are there, it's so authentic and it's so real. And there's so much hunger for the Lord and so much faith where people want to be healed. You just want to be there and you just want to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so for the past 18 years, I've been out there in a ministry-based capacity. And several years ago, I started going through health issues. And so I had a lot of doctor's appointments. And during that time, I would be in the doctor's office several times a week. And girls who had been at the juvenile prison facility, who had aged out of the facility, would reach out. And so I would use those times when I was at the doctor's office to just kind of reach out to them and just check in on them, to encourage them, to see how they're doing. And so it was through that period of time that I learned what they were going through and saw the service gap of services that were needed after kids age out of the juvenile prison. So once kids were turning 18 or 19, they would go back to their communities, they would go back to their families, and they would want help, but they wouldn't know how to connect. And I had a aged out youth who said, Liz, I might as well go to adult prison just to get services. And my heart broke. And so I said, we have to do this better because we build trusting relationships with these youth inside of the prison. And there are services out there. They just need a connector and somebody that they trust. And not only that, they're just looking for somebody to encourage them and to just pray with them and just help guide as a mentor. And so a couple of years ago, God gave me a full vision and he said, Liz, I want you to create this nonprofit and it's called Hope in Motion. And so we just got our 501c3 status in January, but we were meeting informally in a house and just kind of doing things informally before that, where we would meet kids for dinner when they reached out, or meet in hotel parking lots, or be anywhere in the community just to reach out to them and to encourage them. So with the nonprofit, God has just increased our ministry exponentially. And even since January, we're running services inside of the juvenile prison. We have programming. We're doing parenting classes for the kids. So it's just been crazy to see the need and the incredible spiritual growth and the incredible spiritual warfare that goes on in that facility. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Wow. And do you see a lot, I'm sure you know a lot of their stories. Do they share a lot about what brought them? Is it things, because I just was thinking about our last guest. We had Celeste Tracy on and she was talking about rapists and things like that. A lot of them came, actually have a background of being emotionally neglected or, having some kind of neglect in their background. So is that what's pretty common?
So it's funny because as a social worker on my job, there's certain things I can ask, but kids won't tell me. But when I'm at this facility as a ministry-based volunteer, and we're there with that approach of unconditional love and just sharing the good news of Jesus, the kids share with us and they open up to us and they talk about their past and they talk about their families. And we never ask them what they did or why they're there, but a lot of times they will tell us. But we are there to walk alongside them. There is no judgment. We are just there to be the hands and feet of Jesus and our kingdom vision. And the kingdom vision of Hope in Motion is we've seen kids that have aged out become leaders in their communities. They'll become leaders with their gangs. They'll become leaders with their friends. They'll become leaders with their family. They'll go on to work in adult corrections and they'll have children. And so we know something is going right. And so it's just powerful because we know we're living in end times and God has such a heart for this facility that he's so on fire right now. And he's building these kingdom leaders to serve as leaders in their communities when they get out and to break the intergenerational chains of their families.
Wow. So you work with youth in the prison and once they get out, because once they get out, that's got to be hard too for them to transition back into the world. Is that correct?
Absolutely, because some of those kids are there for years. And so when you're in there and you have safety and structure and you know what to expect every day, and then you're going back to a situation that maybe hasn't changed, or you're going back to the same situation where you were doing drugs or the same gang. Yeah, it's challenging for those kids, but there are kids that genuinely really want help. They just need somebody to help connect them. So when we're doing the transitional work, we're finding the trends with the girls. It's kind of different between the boys and the girls, but with the girls, they're always with somebody. So they're either with another aged out female youth, or they're with a significant other, or they're with their family. Boys are looking for a place to go. They don't necessarily have a family to go back to. So it's very, very interesting that the difference between the two.
Wow.
But we do enjoy that transitional planning piece. And then again, we're providing ministry-based support and unity between services at the juvenile prison. And then we're also, this is a new creative approach. So we're doing something called intentional programming that God just opened the floodgate on. So we have programs inside of the juvenile prison now for parenting. We have yoga. We have art therapy. We have Dave Ramsey's financial curriculum. We have life skills groups. And these are all led by Christian leaders, but they're not ministry based. So they're open to all of the kids on the facility. So the goal is to build these trusting relationships and then to encourage them to go to service that night or to go to the service that's assigned to their unit. And so we're building relationships across the facility. And it's crazy how much God's favor has been there.
Yeah. Too bad you weren't there when my ex was in juvenile prison and he would have had all these programs and help.
That's great.
Well, it's funny you say that, Brenda, right? Because I think there's a stigma sometimes with kids that are in juvenile prison, and we don't excuse what they do, right? But we have to approach them with unconditional love because these kids are going to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to pour into them because they're going to get out into the community and they can make a difference and they will make a difference. So whatever we can do now to do that. And I think what was most surprising to me, we knew the girls, how many of them were having children once they got released, but with the boys, we didn't have an idea. And so there was one church service inside of the juvenile prison earlier this year where I just asked the question of the boys about how many of them were fathers. And half of the boys in our services were fathers.
Wow.
And so we wanted to, God wanted to bring fatherhood back to these kids. He wants to raise them up and to be good fathers. He wants to break generational cycles. And these kids, once they were acknowledged as parents, were like going back to their staff and saying, we want parenting classes. And so the facility was looking at how to staff this. And then God gave me a provider to connect to the facility.
Yeah, that stuff's critical.
Yeah, and so needed especially if they didn't have a good role model, then, just to be able to learn those skills, they don't repeat the same pattern.
Yeah.
Right.
So your passion stemmed from being a social worker. That's how you started in the prisons. Is that what you said in the beginning or?
Yeah, my mother worked for the school for homeless kids when I was in high school. And so I would always go volunteer over there. And I just had a heart for people that needed help. I had a heart for people that were overlooked. And so God just put it on my heart way back then. And then when I was doing church-based retreats when I was around 18, one of those church-based retreats had something similar inside of the juvenile prison. And I'd actually served on one of those retreats with someone that aged out of the juvenile prison. And so I saw what he walked through when he aged out and how little services he had. And so, once I connected, again, the youth are just so real and so hungry. We went through a period where we couldn't get any Bibles into the facility. But since February, we've gotten over 160 Bibles in. And it's not just kids, it's staff, it's kids are getting them for their family members.
That's great.
And they're coming to services wanting to learn the word of God. So it's powerful.
It is powerful.
Yeah.
Life-changing, especially being in that situation, having time to think about it.
Yeah. So I was wondering, as Karen's question was earlier, about how many have been through trauma or abuse, if they talk to you about that, how many of them. Do you have any statistics in the prisons of how abuse is related to your prison ministry?
So I don't know statistics, Brenda, but I can just say qualitative research or just even just what my experience has been, because
Uh-huh.
I know a lot of the girls have been involved in trafficking. I know we do individual prayer with the kids once a week who sign up, and the theme that we see some sort of intergenerational chain that needs to be broken. And then, of course, with abuse, there's stuff that's reported and stuff that's not reported. And so I do feel like there's a significant correlation between trauma and ending up at the facility. And then there's a very, very high percentage of substance use. But anytime you have substance use, you look at the reason why, right?
Yeah,
And so
Yeah, why you're numbing
when you
out.
start asking the questions and you hear the kids actually tell their story from someone that believes them, it's very powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, and I haven't got the book, but I was listening to the TED Talk. I can't remember the guy's name, but he wrote a book and he was basically saying that all addiction is basically a lack of connection.
Yeah.
So, that makes sense. If you grew up with neglect and things like that, you're going to be probably drawn towards addiction.
Or even, and I think parents are well-intentioned, but parents do what they know or what they know how.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And they might not be aware of the intergenerational cycle. And
Right.
so they do the best with what they know. And a lot of the boys don't have fathers or do have fathers that are incarcerated. And you have a lot of single moms that are trying to do the best that they can with raising these kids. But as we're learning, when we're praying with these kids and we're asking the questions about their family and we're praying for the family, we're seeing things that we can pray through to break through. And these kids are learning how to not only forgive themselves, but to forgive their families and to forgive other people. And so it's become a place of healing. I know that they're inside of a juvenile prison, but God is just breaking those chains and just setting them free.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, because I think Celeste Tracy, in the podcast we're doing with her right now, says that most of our behavior, I don't even know if she says all, stems from the first 1,000 days of our life and the attachment that we have with our parents.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it probably has a lot to relate to that. And, sometimes it's not the parents' fault. They just either, like my mom got ill and she couldn't take care of her. There was an emotional disconnect because she was sick.
Yeah,
Or like,
sometimes
yeah,
things,
like Karen's mom had
Right.
what happened with your mom?
No, she didn't have a miscarriage. She had a baby boy lived for 4 months.
So emotionally, so there, a lot of times it's not really the parents' fault, but it does cause a lot of issues in us as we're older.
Yeah.
So it's so nice that you're helping with that healing process for them,
Yeah.
especially spiritually, because spiritual healing is what a lot of people leave out. And you're just showing with the proof that God is really the real healer.
Yeah.
And it's just doing miraculous things in these kids.
Yeah. Have you ever heard that song by, I don't know why I was thinking about it, by Stephen Curtis Chapman called Free?
I love Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Yeah. Have you heard the song Free? Because it's about going into a prison. I love that song. I always turn that up as loud. It's just a great song. You have to listen to it. It's called Free by Stephen Curtis Chapman.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I love him and I love his story.
Yeah. It's an old song, but it's a powerful song.
Yeah. And I had my own stint. You guys listen to my podcast. I went for 30 days. I was young and didn't realize that I had felt abandoned and had issues as a child. I didn't understand that at that age. So here I was getting in trouble too. And it really did draw me closer to the Lord going to jail. It really did. So I don't know why it does that, but it does do that for people.
Yeah. It's like hitting rock bottom.
Yeah. It's because you're at rock bottom and you don't have any strength and you're kind of at the end.
Yeah.
The breaking point. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, Brenda, right? So with me, I didn't understand. So it wasn't until I was in an abusive marriage, right? And so it was during that time I started going to counseling because with work, with counseling, with my family, it was just a lot. And it was during that time when I went to counseling that I realized what was the root of the issue, right? And so you start looking at things that you have been through as a child intergenerationally. And you see, for me, what made me an enabler in my marriage? What are things that I could have done differently when I went through that use, right? And so I saw things in my family that hadn't been broken yet. And so when God healed me, and he delivered me from that abusive marriage. And I started looking at my roots and God was showing me where they came from. And he showed me in my family. And I started asking questions about all of the different generations and started praying through it. God would have me look at memories or something that was painful. And he would have me write that root down. And then I would write down, how did I feel when I went through that? And then I look at what was the lie of the enemy when I was going through that. And then he would have me replace it with his truth and his word.
Mm-hmm.
And so he healed me through that. So he didn't just heal me from all the trauma from my marriage, but he healed me from the intergenerational chains. And he's actually had me pray for my family to help set them free as well.
Yeah.
And so God is bringing hope and healing there. And that's given me a story. I know we talk about why do things happen to people, right? And so I had asked God for my husband, and I didn't ask for the abuse. I didn't ask to be treated the way that I was. I came in as an enabler, but I didn't ask to go through all that. And so I just remember just crying out to God and saying, this can't be marriage, right? Marriage can't hurt this bad. And God set me free. I went through some of that church hurt of like the different opinions about if it was abuse, if this happens, or if this doesn't happen, and is it okay to divorce, and God delivered me from that. And he has made me into an incredibly strong woman of God. And he's given me this ministry to pour into, and he's given me this authenticity to relate to these kids and to these moms and to these families, and found my identity in setting women free that have been through trauma. And so I just praise God for that.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I feel like that's in the pain of my marriage. That's where I feel like I probably drew the closest to the Lord, because I had that moment where he validated me. Like before anyone else did, God validated me. It's like he gave me that moment of letting me know in a supernatural way that he saw my pain. And that was such a special moment for me that's carried me through. Even it'll always carry me through my faith. I want those moments more. It's like, God, can you give me that moment again? Because it was just, I couldn't even explain it. And the other day I came across my journal the day that happened. And I just hold on to things like that.
And I think perspective too. So when I'm praying with these kids and they're sharing with me what they went through when their parents had domestic violence in the home, or they're sharing memories about why didn't mom do this, I can relate and I can share my experience about what I went through. And I can also share with them that maybe their parent went through something that they don't know how to cope with.
Right.
Yeah.
And how to pray for their parent. If their parent is acting this way, you ask why, right? And you pray for them and you break that chain. So again, not only are we setting these kids free, but we're helping them to set their families free.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and empathy
awesome.
goes a long way.
Says 19% of state prison inmates, 16% in local jails have been physically or sexually abused before their most recent admission to a correctional population. That's interesting. And then relatively few studies have systematically examined the issue. And among those that have, rates of abuse of juvenile and adult inmates range from a low of 9% to as high as 80%. That's kind of a large range. Okay. That means you haven't done really a study.
And I feel that a lot of the girls want to get pregnant just to experience that kind of love.
Here's this one. What percentage of prisoners have trauma? According to the CDC, around 60% of adults have at least one traumatic childhood experience compared to 97% of inmates. So 97% of inmates have had trauma. Wow. That's pretty high.
Wow.
So.
Well, and even, looking at statistics when I created the nonprofit of the recidivism rate from juvenile to adult prison, I want to say it's around 70 or 80%. It's pretty high.
Once you get out of juvenile, that you end up in adult
prison at some point.
80%? Right?
It's somewhere up there. It's pretty high. And then it's for taxpayers, I want to say it's around $60,000 per year per inmate in the adult system.
Wow. Oh, that's a lot of money.
So it's why don't we pour support into these kids? When they get
so what you're doing is you're keeping them from doing that. So if anybody wants to support your nonprofit so that they don't have to pay so they'll stop using all the taxpayers' money to put them in adult prison, you're preventing that. How can they find your nonprofit and donate to you? Or if that's something that's on their heart, how can they find you?
Absolutely. So they can find us on our website, www.connecttohim.org. And we have a donate button on that website, and we appreciate anything. And we're so grateful for any support. And right now, everything we receive is going directly to the kids.
That's great. That's such a needed ministry.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're able to do that.
Changing lives while they're young and keeping that and that actually them becoming leaders. That's incredible.
Yeah.
In their communities.
So it makes such a difference.
Yeah. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. And again, with all the parents out there, a lot of those kids are parents. So we want to break the child abuse cycle too. We want them to be successful parents. We want them to raise their kids, and they want to be good parents. Just sometimes they don't know how. And so with our parenting classes, and then we have an early reader program coming in, we want to teach them how to read to their kids. And so we want them to be successful. So we're doing child abuse prevention. We're doing adult prison prevention. But really, again, a lot of these kids just want to connect and they just want words of encouragement. They want to know that somebody believes in them and will always be there for them as a support.
Yeah. Now I look at it in a completely different way. Like now that I know more about what you do, like when you think of adult prisoners, you just start to get like, well, they should be in there. That's probably better off. But when you're talking about youth that they're not even adults yet, their minds aren't even mature till they're 25 and they have a chance at a good life. What you're doing is critical. It's just critical.
Yeah, it is.
So just hope you'll get all the support you need. And do you also need like volunteers at all or?
Yeah, we are still bringing new programs in. We're looking to expand our transition program. So yes, we are always looking for volunteers and people who want to connect and who are interested in giving back to these kids.
That's great. Well, thanks again for being on the podcast. Anything else you'd want to share? Anything else you want to share about your ministry?
I just thank you guys for this opportunity to just share about the youth at the juvenile prison. I'm connected to other ministries across the U.S. and across the world that also do juvenile justice ministries. And we are so grateful for anybody that prays for these facilities as well. And so if you're a praying person, just know that when we're doing this work, there's strong spiritual warfare. And we appreciate any prayer of covering for us, for the youth, for the facilities, just for prayer of hope. Because right now we're seeing this theme of discouragement and depression right now. And so we just want to pray against that and just continue to put seeds of hope there and to just keep hope in motion. So we appreciate any support, whether it be by prayer or by donation, and just keeping us in your prayers.
Yeah. And I love the name of that, Hope in Motion. That's a great name.
Thank you. And it's an acronym for him. So we want to connect everybody to him.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Liz.
Yes, we appreciate you, Liz.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful night.
You too.
All right, you too.
Because I don't take pictures, guys. So
no, why not?
We can't stand it either. What are you talking about?
So I've done two interviews in 2 days of photos.
We're the worst. Like 3 years ago, we're like, well, we'll get ready someday and do another photo. No, we need to do it.
It's my passion. You guys are talking to me about my two passions. Well, three. I mean, Jesus. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. And I don't want to take up any more of your time, but we love you.
Love you guys. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful week. I'll be praying for you all. And again, I appreciate you. And you're my soul sisters and my sisters in ministry. So
too.
Pray that God covers you with peace this week and is with you and surrounds you. And again, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there. And if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.